How do I cope with anxiety?
Anxiety. Anxiety about the future. Anxiety about oneself. People are very anxious, aren't they? People have panic attacks. They get so anxious that it triggers an energetic movement in the body. The heart starts palpitating, and the next thing they're mixing that up into with a lot of thinking, and it's just out of control. The mind just takes off like a bad trip. Is there anything really to be anxious about? Does anxiety serve me in any way? Is there really anything to be anxious about? It all depends on who you're being and where you're coming from. I know people who are anxious. They're just never anxious. And they don't have anxiety attacks. And they don't really worry. So it feels like it's really not a natural state to be this anxious. And the opposite of anxiety is peace. Because with peace comes clarity. The clarity to see that you don't need to be anxious. My mother, God rest her soul, she always used to say to me when I'd come back from a journey or whatever, "Oh, I was so worried about you. I was so anxious about you." And I'm thinking, I used to say to her, "Well, don't be. You know, it doesn't help me." You being anxious, because she would tell me, like, you know, somehow her anxiety about me would somehow be means that she loved me or means that it was helping me. Didn't mean that she loved me. You don't express anxiety, you know, anxiety is an expression of love for anybody. It's an expression of not understanding how life is. Something we don't know, and in the absence of knowing that, we feel anxious. What is it we would need to know in order to never be anxious again? What is it you'd need to know about yourself, or perhaps the self, that would remove all anxiety about who am I? Do they like me? Am I good enough? Forever. It would remove it forever. Knowing this one thing, being able to access this one thing, being this one thing, would banish anxiety. What is that one thing? Is it possible that there is such a thing? If you're identifying yourself as a person, then you're on very unstable ground immediately, because it isn't actually who we are, and so we're under a constant threat, and somewhere inside us we know we're not a person, and it's always subject to attack, and we have to defend, and circumstances, threatening circumstances. How do we know what's going to happen next? What if my fear comes next? It actually takes shape. Well, if your fear did take shape, what would make it take shape? You having that fear, does it push this thing you're fearing away, or does it draw it to you? It's actually more likely to draw it to you. Having the fear of it, does it help you really in any way? No. So, human beings were not created to be anxious. If we are anxious, it's because our position is incorrect. Our position in this life, our viewpoint, our perspective, must be from a person, from an ego, from an unstable point. And we know that. And that's where the source of the anxiety comes from, is we know we're not who we are. And we know we're not tuned to what really is. It's a very subtle knowing that. When you are who you are, you know you are who you are. It's full of peace, very, very simple, light, just no problem. And by being in the present as that, you don't really have any fear of the future. You can hear that chatter. When you fear the future, it's always triggered by thought. When you have anxiety, it's always created by thought. When you have a panic attack, it's always triggered by a thought. But these thoughts come so quickly, and as we're identifying ourselves as the thinker, we get hijacked by them. But when we are who we are, when we're in that peace, when we're in that simple beingness, when we've stepped out of the persona into the I am, then there's a greater awareness. So when anxious thoughts start to arise, anxious thoughts we go. And we don't immediately buy into them, but we see them as some kind of occurrence that's happening. And we've got some kind of, I'm the subject, there's the object. We're able to look at them rather than think, I am the subject of these thoughts. And that's the great transition. That we start to understand what's going on inside. That who am I is the best answer I can give. Is it that I'm the thinker? Well, it really better not be. Because all the misery, all the anxiety, all the suffering that is created in anyone's life is only created by the internal dialogue. Situations and events, they do not create anxiety. People do not create anxiety. It's who we're being that these things are that gives us anxiety. It's our thoughts about these circumstances and people and things and possibilities that give us the anxiety. Babies are not anxious. They're just in bliss, present, having simple needs which they express immediately. Anxiety started. There'll be a point in your life which will actually be your most anxious point. Perhaps it'll be a panic attack. Oh God, I remember that time I couldn't move. I was sitting in the corner of the room shaking. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I wet myself. I was just completely freaked out. And then after that, things will diminish. There'll be a peak and then it'll fade out. And then there'll be peace. That can happen quickly. Just something to understand. Who you are cannot be anxious. Who you truly are. Not the persona. Not who you've made yourself to be. Who you truly are. Is never anxious and doesn't experience fear, shame, or guilt, or any negative emotions. Who I truly am. Who am I? That's the question that you have to keep asking. Who am I? It's the most wondrous answer. There's no question that has a more wonderful answer than that question. And soon the answer to that question is non-verbal, non-conceptual. You're not asking your mind to, am I? It's already told you that you're not good enough, that who you are is subject to your past, who you are is broken, who you are doesn't work properly, who you are is anxious, watch out, this world is really dangerous. So you're not asking that one, who am I? You're asking the one that is who you are, who am I? And the answer comes as calmness, as peace, as equanimity, as love, as clarity, as presence, as a sense of arriving, as relief, as gratitude, as joy, as simplicity.